back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the Epstein vote and the Republican Party as the GOP in the House of Representatives shuts down the House floor ahead of an earlier day than they were supposed to ahead of an August recess. They won't convene again until September 2nd after tomorrow, preventing any type of vote from members of their own constituency, members of their own coalition on the GOP side as well as the Democratic side on any vote pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is actually pretty big news as the Republican Party still faces significant battles within their own political party as many members of the MAGA base, including some prominent members across social media and in press releases, have come out in opposition to this decision from President Donald Trump, who says these Epstein files just simply do not exist. And he then went on to call people who were continuing to talk about the Epstein files as disloyal and in opposition to what this administration is trying to do. But altogether, it is really shaping up to be like one, really big failure on the side of Donald Trump's administration. He came into this election promising that he was going to release the Jeffrey Epstein files after winning the election. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was confirmed by the U.S. Senate, eventually came out and said that no such files exist. Now, very obviously, a lot of the supporters on the Republican side aren't happy with this. And many Democrats and independents also feel similarly, where they look at the Epstein files and they say, this is something that is very clear-cut. Donald Trump is either going to release the files or he's not, and either direction, there is something to be understood that when you make this promise, that isn't as simple as as complex rather, as I'm going to fix the economy, I'm going to save your health care, I'm going to ensure you have benefits, whatever it might be. It is so simple insofar that you just say we're either releasing it or we're not. And now Donald Trump is really jumping on it and saying we're not going to release it at all. Now, the Republican Party is shutting down a House vote and also trying to quietly work with the Trump administration to try to encourage them as far as they can to release any files that they might have on Jeffrey Epstein. There seems to be a major push from many members of the Republican Party who adamantly believe that the Epstein files do exist and that they contain incriminating information that must be made available to the general public. And whether or not these files end up being this big revelation that people think they are, I mean, to be fair, we don't know exactly what's in them, which is why there are these calls from many Americans across the country who saw the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein, the death of Jeffrey Epstein, and the continuation of conversation around Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, all of these different things that certainly have come into conversation that are still relevant today. The Republican Party is not winning the messaging battle on Epstein, and it doesn't look like they're going to do so as it continues. And it looks like, too, NBC News came out with this article talking about a victim who said that it feels like Trump's administration and their handling of the Epstein case is adding to their anguish, saying, quote, all the work we did to tell the world what happened to us, it's all being erased. And it very much seems like it isn't something that, people are looking at and saying, this is simple, right? They aren't looking at this and making a defense of Donald Trump. Many of his own supporters are actually looking at it and saying, this is something that they will draw the line on. They might not have drawn it on other things that Donald Trump had done in the past, but it very uniquely seems to be hitting a point for a lot of Republicans across the board who very much rely on things like this as reasons as to why they say they voted for Trump. I mean, we saw it in the 2024 election. This wasn't some type of minor portion. Donald Trump campaigned on this vigorously, that there were, massive amounts of Democrats and billionaires and people that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, and that once he was elected, that he would release the files on day one. Well, we are 6 months in, and the files are not released. And a lot of Republicans are very upset about that, and they aren't letting it up. And now, the Oversight Committee is looking to subpoena Maxwell as expeditiously as possible, a spokesperson for the majority Oversight Committee, might I add, not just the Democrats. But the Republicans want to do it too. Now, taking a look at the actual data around how many Republicans, independents, Democrats, just in general Americans care about the Epstein files, it actually is more significant than otherwise thought. Right now, Americans are very upset with the handling of the Epstein files. You can see here that 54% disapprove of the way that Donald Trump is handling the Epstein files, and just 17% approve. Quinnipiac University did another poll. The first one was from Reuters. The second one shows 63% of the country disapproves of the handling of the Epstein files, whereas 17% approve. This is interesting. Thinking about where we're at, how do people believe, Donald Trump is handling issues like this, ones that are now very salient and very important in this day and age to a lot of voters across the country? It seems like something that is largely inconsequential, but it's the one thing that actually seems to be fracturing an otherwise very loyal base. People generally on the MAGA side trust Donald Trump in everything that he says. I mean, this is a fact. His approval rating amongst Republicans maintains itself as one of the highest approval ratings we have seen for an incumbent president, even amongst their own political party. But on this issue is where a lot of voters are starting to sour on this decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're saying they're done with Trump and they're done with Republicans, but they might feel a bit disoriented about where they are. Seeing moves like this don't help. There was a time about a week ago when the Epstein files wouldn't be released and Donald Trump was trying to say it's because Obama and Clinton and Biden made these files, whatever it might be, but very obviously his base wasn't going for it. They weren't believing what he was putting out on Truth Social. But it was able to be guided by the way Donald Trump talked about the issue and the things that the administration did. But you did have some Republicans who did actually say that they wanted to release the Epstein files. But when it came down to an actual congressional vote, all the Republicans, nearly all of them, voted against the release of the Epstein files. But now more and more Republicans are changing tune. While they may have voted present or voted against the provision in the past, they are now changing their minds about where they are. They're now saying, I want to vote for the release of the Epstein files. And so Mike Johnson, as the speaker, decided that they're going to shut down the House floor starting on Thursday rather than Friday. And they aren't going to meet until September 2nd, meaning that for about a month and a half, the House of Representatives simply will not have the ability, unless Mike Johnson calls for it, to vote on these bills. That is why this is pretty significant. I mean, you are finding now that it only plays further into the same talking points and the narrative that the Democratic Party has been building successfully, might I add, against the GOP and against Donald Trump's administration and their handling of the Epstein files, that they are afraid of something coming out. And whether or not they actually are afraid, perception is reality in American politics. We talk a lot about the vibes economy. We can talk about this in vibes as well, even if these Epstein files do not end up with the big revelation that people are looking for. If they don't end up with the names that they thought they would see, a lot of people might be disappointed, but a lot of this country just simply won't trust the findings that are released by this administration. Because it was so clear-cut when Donald Trump said at rallies, in interviews, in TV hits, whatever it was, that if he was elected, the immediate step would be to get the Attorney General to release, through the Department of Justice, to release the Epstein files. And because that is not happening, and Republicans are setting up the roadblocks every step of the way, and Democrats are uniformly voting in favor of releasing the files to a lot of these voters that look at issues like this as primary issues for them. And that's not the majority of the nation, but there are sections of this country that on this issue voted overwhelmingly for Trump that may not feel that same energy in the 2026 midterm elections. And looking back at the last House elections, and arguably to the Senate elections, a lot of states were decided on the margins, and a lot of districts were as well. And it is in these districts that Democrats will see an overperformance in relative to 2024 in 2026. And looking just plainly put at where Democrats are across the board, they're already winning the generic ballot today. Donald Trump's approval rating is already the lowest it has been in a very, very long time. And moments like this only continue the distrust that many Americans have in the political process, that many Americans have in the President of the United States. And when it comes time to ask them to turn out and vote for the GOP, they may not get out there and vote for Democrats, but there's no guarantee they get out and vote at all in favor of the GOP. And that could make a huge difference. Enthusiasm is what drives turnout for midterm elections in favor of one party or another. In 2018, those midterm elections were largely guided by Democrats being excited to turn out. 2014, a vastly different map. Democrats didn't feel excited to turn out. Republicans did. 4 years prior, 2010, same deal. In fact, the House majority, Democrats lost 63 seats in the House of Representatives. 63 seats. All because of enthusiasm, some persuasion, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that Republicans were fired up. They wanted to turn out across the country, and they mobilized, and they did. And now thinking about where we are in 2026, coming off of 2024, these decisions from House Republicans to avoid an Epstein vote is never a good look. The American public isn't going to look at this fondly and say, well, it makes sense. They need to have their break in August, right? No. A lot of voters and a lot of Americans aren't done talking about Epstein. As much as the White House wants to pivot and wants to talk about other things, very clearly, even members of the own MAGA base, who often are more inclined to side with the president than not, are still adamant that something needs to come out. Because they believe that, looking at where they are in this circumstance, is that now you're finding that the Washington Post is coming out with, the Wall Street Journal, rather, is coming out with a letter, supposedly, that Donald Trump might have written to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. A lot of people are trying to do this rally around the flag effect for Donald Trump, but simultaneously don't trust him on Epstein because of the lack of releasing of the files. And now the House Republicans, some of them, have enough votes to join the Democrats and force a release of the files. And instead of holding the vote, as you see the Oversight Committee trying to subpoena, you will find that it is moments like this where you realize Mike Johnson knows he doesn't have the votes to stop the releasing of the Epstein files. So instead of calling a vote on it, as traditionally a speaker would right before August recess, they have time. Not only is he not calling a vote before you get to recess, he's axing an entire day off the congressional calendar to move it to off session, which makes it impossible, truly impossible. You literally cannot do it. You cannot vote on an off session day. It won't happen. The House won't be in session. The Congress people will move their flights to fly back home on Thursday morning, and it'll be all said and done until September 2nd, which it seems as if Mike Johnson is hoping there's time between then and now and then to change the narrative, to have people forget, to have people in a position where they no longer remember that the Republican Party and Donald Trump shut down the releasing of the Epstein files, the votes on the releasing of the Epstein files. And while this House Republican conference is again trying to work with the White House to get them to say, you need to release files, you need to do X, Y, and Z, you need to give us something, because you can see that it is this issue of many that are starting to break through to the average American, where they say, this is something that I can tangibly say I do not believe is good and done for by this administration to benefit the American public, but rather to defend and protect members of their own party or members of their own class, whatever it is. It's never a good look that this administration just simply can't do it. So I am interested to see how much this impacts the 2026 midterms. CBS News did a poll talking about the Epstein files, asking voters about, how much this actually matters to them in elections. Let's see if we can pull it up here. But you will find that actually, a significant chunk of the American public looks at things like Epstein and says, this actually does matter to me in the midterm elections. Looking at this, 89% say the DOJ should release all its information regarding the Epstein case, right? Trump admin handling of matters relating to the Epstein case. 83% of independents say they are dissatisfied. Nearly half of Republicans say they are dissatisfied. Huge. Think about this too. Even members that identify as Make America Great Again members of the party, Republicans, just 60% are satisfied with the handling of the Epstein case. And taking a look too, in terms of evaluating the Trump presidency, nearly 45%, in fact, about 45% either say a lot or a little in evaluating Donald Trump's presidency. That is a huge amount. More Republicans, are starting to look at this and say, we are souring on the president and how he's handling this case because it, again, was so simple to see. You either release them or you don't. And because they're pulling all these tricks to try to prevent the release, even if there is nothing there, it makes people feel like there is. And when you have people who are Epstein victims coming out and saying that it feels like we are being erased, it further adds to this general idea and a narrative that has been pushed simply because of the actions of the Republican Party that only make people more suspicious about the things that exist within these files. And so we'll see. The Republicans might end up deciding that they have to do a vote on it. The subpoenaing might happen, and you might see a testifying before Congress, whatever it is. Testimony is the word I was looking for. I can't believe I forgot that. Testimony before Congress. We will see, because I do not think, just because Republicans are in recess and the House isn't convening, that the American public will conveniently forget about this. And come September 2nd, Epstein might be just as much of a story then as it is today. And we will see the Republicans' response and reaction over the coming weeks, over the coming months, in response to what is a very clear call coming from the American public, which is a full and total release of all information from the Department of Justice related to Jeffrey Epstein. And for a lot of America, they look at this and say, there must be a reason you are protecting it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.